Hi everyone, just waiting for people to join, so please say hi in the chat. Got Brandon here as well. Hi. So yeah, we'll give it a few minutes for everyone to join. We're going to be going through firstly the material from February, and then we're going to show you some instructive positional games, including one of Brandon's from last night, which you'll be pleased to see. I think it's very good. And then we'll have a break at 3 o'clock. So we'll end the webinar then. And then if you just join back in at 3:15, then Mickey Adams will join for his session, which is going to be an hour as well. So where is Brandon? Brandon is probably at home.
I am, yes.
So
busy moving tomorrow.
Oh, you're moving? Oh, wow.
I am, yeah. We've moved to Cambridge.
Oh, wow. Did you live in Oxford?
I'm not, yeah, Oxford at the moment.
Oh, okay, cool. Excellent, that's exciting.
Not really. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably not the best time to be moving or things. But yeah, children, there's some really good news that the tournaments are hoping to come back. So there's already talk of a 4NCL tournament at the end of June. So I know you're missing tournaments, I'm missing tournaments, Brandon's missing tournaments, we're all missing them. So there's lots of events that we hope will happen at the end of the year. And with the UK Chess Challenge, we're just planning what we're doing, but we're definitely going to have a Terra final in person if it's safe to do so. Yeah, and we've also sent out to you the test for February. So I advise the parents that maybe you should do that after this session, but some of you may have already done it this morning, just to see how you're getting on. And one thing that I think is important is, because you're working at home going through this material, I really want questions and feedback. So please don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you've got a question, I'm sure somebody else will probably be thinking the same thing. So I really want questions. I'm going to start by just showing you the February material, and I'm encouraging people to ask questions. We're on a webinar now, so you can actually ask those in the Q&A section, or you can ask them in the chat. Brandon and I will be looking at both, but I prefer the Q&A for questions, because then I can mark them when I've answered them and I won't miss anything. When does the UK Chess Challenge start? Well, we're having a meeting about it next week, so we're going to announce everything next week. Fingers crossed. We're kind of doing it a bit later this year, so that we can hopefully have as much as possible over the board, which is exciting. Okay, so we've got lots of people here now, so we'll get started. Hi everyone, and thank you very much for joining. I see there's already a question in the Q&A. How do I see the quiz leaderboard? Are you referring to the test quiz? Not sure about that. I will come back to that later. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now and we'll get started, because we've only got an hour. We need to finish this first session promptly at 3 o'clock, and then Mickey will be joining. So can everyone see my screen? Yeah. Okay, so this is the material that you all sent for February. So we decided that it's probably better to just show you the material, take any questions, and then we can show you some extra things in this first hour. So positional chess is an area of chess that juniors don't really like. I'm not being rude, but you're all into your attacking chess and your tactics, and positional chess is probably less boring. In fact, I prefer attacking chess. I think you do as well, Brandon. Is that right?
I did until recently, but actually now I'm starting to appreciate more positional games. So we'll see later on one of my games I played last night. And when you see games like this, actually it's quite satisfying, where you can just slowly squeeze the life out of your opponent and take absolutely no risks of losing.
Well, that's it's not got the risks, whereas attacking chess, if you miss something, then you just end up losing. Like say you sacrifice a piece, then it doesn't work, then you lose. But positional chess, if you're a master of that, I mean, some of you came to Keith's session, then you can really be confident that you'll actually get the results without having all these setbacks where you end up losing to somebody a lot weaker than you and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a very important area of chess, and you know, if you can learn positional chess well at this age, then you're doing great. So we tried to put it together as C, prioritize an action, as a way of like thinking about things. So I'm just going to explain. So obviously king safety is the most important element in chess. So there's no point worrying about pawn structure when you're about to get checkmated. So, I mean, it's quite hard to sort of tell you when you need to be thinking about positional chess and attacking chess, But I think from playing through lots of instructive games and looking at examples, and that should really help you with your decision. Prioritize, yeah, so it's important to pick the right moment. If you see a line that's completely winning through some nice tactics, then definitely go for it. But then if it's something that's a bit more risky and there's an alternative route which is just sensible and risk-free, then a lot of strong players will opt for that option instead. Action, time to do something constructive, maneuver, exchange, levers, storm, harass, and restrict. So obviously you've seen this before, so I'm not going to spend loads of time going through this, but I just wanted to highlight things. And please do ask questions if there's anything in here you're not sure about. That's what we want. We want questions. So let's get to a bit further down. So yeah, I mean, this is a good example. You know, there's no point worrying about bishop takes knight and saying, oh, I'm going to get double pawns, when you can play rook c1, get an active rook, and white's going to be completely better in that end game. So it's about sort of working out which factor is most important. And that's not something that's easy to teach, but through experience and looking at lots of games, then you will learn that. So we put together a little toolkit, which is here. And we put our hero of the month, Botvinnik. He is fantastic at positional play. So if you've got any spare time this weekend, I'd advise you to have a look at some of his games. And that's the end of that. So Brandon's going to highlight a few things now. I'm going to look at a game that shows the importance of the bishops. So I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment. And if you do yours, Brandon, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Then do share. You need to allow me to share, I think.
I do, right? Okay. I will do that now. All panelists, there we go. Should be working now, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so if I do that, they should be able to see everything apart from the moves. This was exactly the way I like it. Just in case I want to ask any questions. All right, so yeah, this one I wanted to focus on the bishop pair, because this is one of the main types of imbalances you'll see strong players going for, because it's one where it's quite easy to obtain, especially at low levels, because a lot of people will don't kind of disregard the strength of the bishop pair. They just think that, oh, you know, these guys are supposed to be worth 3 points each. These guys also 3 points each. So they just look at its position, think it should be pretty straightforward, it should just be equal, right? But actually, the bishops are pretty deadly. And this game is a very nice example of how strong they can become in the hands of a strong player. So we've got some questions in the chat. Can you all see the board?
Yes,
you can see it, right?
Board, yeah. You just can't see the moves because Brandon doesn't want you to see the moves. He wants you to think about. Okay.
Yeah, maybe if you're in the shares option, you need to like maximize your window, like go on full screen mode instead. And you should be able to see everything. Okay, so this is a game where white was a very strong, I believe it's Russian grandmaster, playing the white pieces. Not sure who he was playing against, but very instructive example of how to use this bishop pair in balance. So it's black to move. So he started off with castles. White just continues to centralize pieces, rook to d1, and bishop to c6. And this is the first, I think, critical moment in the game, where a good thing about positional play is all kind of about, you know, prophylaxis and restricting pieces. So white to play here. Can anyone see a good move for white that can restrict?
Just answer privately, please.
Yeah, that would be good. Oh, never mind. Yeah. They're doing to all panelists.
Oh, yeah, like. No, that's really good that you don't have to put it to just to us. So lots of answers. This is great because people have obviously hopefully done their work this month, which is what we want. This is a fantastic move as well. I mean, it just cuts out all of black's play and it's very instructive.
Yeah, so it looks like you're all pretty much on the right track.
Ooh. Some people are still trying to attack.
No, yeah. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but
no. Yeah, for us, we've had a few people saying rook to g5, threatening bishop takes knight. But there's a much better positional move, which lots of people have said correctly, which is fantastic.
Okay, so let's move on then. So yeah, the correct move is to go pawn to f3. Yeah, so congrats if you got that right. The idea is just to restrict both the light square bishop and the knight, so they're both kind of deprived of any forward squares, and that's always a good thing. If you can deprive your opponent of any forward squares for the knight, then he has to kind of look for an alternative home. Rook g5 was suggested by a few of you, which is quite a nice tactical idea in terms of you're trying to take this knight, but maybe they can just move their king to h8, and we didn't really achieve a whole lot. If black can start to trade some pieces on the open file, our rook on g5 may become a little bit misplaced. So yes, we could double the pawns, but again, this is not that critical because we had to give up our very nice bishop pair to do so. And so I'll say rook h5, just f5 from black, and I think he should be fairly comfortable with this position. Okay, so f3 is a much better move. Black played rook fd8. And white was actually happy to capture first. Now, usually as a general rule, you want to try and be the one to capture last, right? Because usually the one that captures last gets the more active piece or position. So taking first is kind of breaking that rule, right? But these guidelines are always there. It's just exactly that, right? They're just general guidelines. And so they can be broken if you have a good reason to do so. Another guideline is that open files, the whole point of having open files is the ability to kind of penetrate into your opponent's half of the board, and specifically the first and second or seventh and eighth ranks, right? So the problem that black has at the moment is white is kind of controlling all of the entry squares into the position. And so therefore, we don't really have to be too worried about black having control of this open file at the moment, since he has no ability to make use of it. Okay, so now white needs to kind of think of a constructive plan. This is another very important part of positional play. Plans are difficult. I don't think anyone really finds them particularly easy. So usually what you got to do is look at the pawn structure. If you have a pawn chain, you look at which way the pawn chain is facing, then you can kind of get an idea of which side of the board you should be attacking on. Also look at your pawn majority. So here white has majority on the queen side, right? He's got 3 pawns against a 2 over here. So that means he has an extra pawn, and so it's likely that any sort of attack he makes on the queen side is going to be stronger, right, than trying to attack, let's say, on the king side. So yeah, William's got an interesting idea. He wants to do a pawn storm on the queen side. Correct? Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. So any idea how to best go about starting that? What should white play here?
A4 and 4 coming through.
Yeah, everyone wants a b4. They still want to attack. Yeah, so most of you got the right idea. You want either a4 or b4. Now in the game, white decided to go for a4, and I think it's always because he wants to just restrict his opponent's pieces as much as possible. Another important part of positional play is not to rush, right? And especially when you come to making pawn moves, you have to be extra careful because every pawn move creates a weakness, and it's always like a long-term thing, right? You can never move your pawns. Exactly, you can never move backwards. So you got to be extra careful when you commit to making a pawn move. So here, white just decided to go start with a4 because he's not yet sure if the pawn wants to go to b4 or maybe he wants to sit on b3. And we'll see this at a later stage.
Yeah, we've had suggestions of king f2 as well. I think that's not a bad move, but I think white needs to sort of have a plan. So it improves the king, which is important, but I think a4 is more direct.
Yeah, exactly. King f2 is a very sensible move, but we'll do that. Yeah, it's again, it's about prioritizing, isn't it? So king f2 is something we definitely want to do at some point, but first we want to clarify the situation on the queen side. Okay, so black needs to find a new home for this knight. This knight may have started off the game on a good square. Now it's become a bit redundant. It has no forward squares available, and so he's not best pleased about his position. So he goes back to d7, attacking our rook. Okay, rook needs to retreat, so back to e2. And now knight to c5. So another important moment in the game. So just remember, when you have the bishop pair advantage, you want to try and hold on to that advantage, right? And what your opponent should be doing, or let's say you're in a situation where you're facing the bishop pair, if you can trade off one of your minor pieces for one of their bishops, then you remove that advantage, right? So white to play here. What do you think is the the best move. Now just keep in mind that a pawn is under attack, so black has a threat. What's the best way to deal with that? Excellent. Looks like you're all got the right answer. So when they say it to all panelists, it just means me and you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, when I first saw that, I thought it was like to everybody, and I was like, why do you tell me
quite good
the answers?
They don't have to message you and me privately like they do in like Zoom.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a bit slow.
Yes, we've had suggestions of A5 as well as the moving B4, B3.
Yeah, Theo made a nice note on that actually. Yeah, so most of you got the correct answer, B3. So congrats again if you got that right. Again, we don't need to be in a rush when we're dealing with positional concepts. We just need to just take away squares for your opponent, slowly drive them back. The problem is you tried to be a bit too eager here. Some of you even suggested B4. So
that's a good point because again, I'm not being rude, but a lot of children, they just want to finish the game quickly and win. But you have to be patient and take your time. It's a very important skill.
Yeah, it's much easier to win in a better position than an equal one, right? So as soon as you go B4, well, now actually your position would be worse. You're just losing a pawn for no reason. The problem with A5, again, it looks maybe tempting because you want to go B4 and B5 and be very aggressive. But again, you've got to always be alert to your opponent's plans as well, not just your own. This is what strong players are doing all the time. And after knight A4, all of a sudden you're losing your bishop pair advantage. Why black would be very happy to swap these guys off. If you try to save him, then you can just go F6, and your bishop is running out squares, and also that's danger to the B2 pawn.
Yeah, and that's how to throw away an advantage.
Yeah, so B3 was the correct move. Black responded with B6. And again, we got to be alert to our opponent's ideas. So what do you think is the best move here for white? How can we improve our position and also be alert to black's ideas? Okay. Careful if you're don't blunder any pieces though. B4, you're losing this A4 pawn again.
Yeah, people are very keen to play B4.
Rook D2.
We don't need to challenge the D file because, like I think Brandon said earlier, the black rook isn't able to do anything on that file. It's actually not a weakness.
Exactly. So shouldn't be in a hurry to do that. Okay. Yeah, so when I talk about threats, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a dynamic threat, right? It can also be a positional threat. So here what black wants to do by playing B6 is he just wants to go A5. And what he's trying to do is just fix your majority. Right? You've got these 3 pawns against 2, and if they get kind of fixed, then you can't really use that advantage, right? And so allowing A5 would be a big problem, I think.
Yeah, and it'll be quite annoying as well for your B pawn because the bishop will be tied to defending it for the whole game. So we need to stop A5.
Exactly. And this is why it's very important to always be alert to your opponent's ideas, because if you just go King F2 and just think, oh yeah, no, I'm just improving my king, I don't really care what my opponent's doing, he goes A5, you're like, bother. Now it's much harder to try and win the game. It could take you ages. So playing A5 yourself is far stronger, preventing black's idea. So congratulations, all of those that got that. Okay, so black went back, knight B7. We should always be happy to see our opponent retreat. And now we have a 50-50 decision to take or not to take. Which one, guys? Who's hungry? Who's taking? William's hungry. Theo's not hungry, so I don't think he's going to take.
Rahul is in Russia, or just put Russia.
Yeah.
Go A6. Not to take.
Ria hasn't had lunch, so she's probably going to take.
Ooh, a bit of a mixed decision here.
Oh, nice. Very 50-50. All right. Well, we've got two options. It's a tricky one. It is definitely a tricky decision to make because advancing the pawn does give you more space, and it fixes these pawns, right? You're just saying that this is going to be a long-term weakness, that if the rook's now got traded and the bishop managed to get it in around the back, these pawns could both fall off, and then this pawn would be very dangerous. But you also got to be very careful, because the further up the board you push your pawns, they can also become more of a weakness, right? Because it's easier for an opponent to attack the pawn and harder for us to be able to defend it. So basically, it's the sort of idea you want to be able to make work. And so now you probably have to do a little bit of calculation and just say, can he get to my pawn anytime soon? Now, luckily, the rook can never come and attack him. The bishop is also going to struggle to attack him. So it's only really the knight. And after knight c5, we just have to make sure that we can find a way to defend, because anything like rook a2 is simply not possible. The bishop, I don't think, would be best pleased if you do some sort of cartwheel over his head. But luckily, we have good old Barry. He can finally advance forward. We're now no longer worried about any like knight a4 ideas, because, well, actually, this is what happened in the game, so I shouldn't reveal too much. But if he takes the pawn, then Barry keeps marching on, and we make a nice fork, right? So again, you see how positional play and dynamics can always go hand in hand, right? They help each other, they're very complementary. Okay, so a6 was the correct move. If it works, then it should be, we should definitely go for it. If it doesn't work, then yeah, maybe then we should just take on b6. That's a safe fallback option. So knight c5, white played b4, and black went knight to a4, trying to get rid of our bishop. So again, another very important moment in the game. You have to find the right move here. If you don't find the right move, maybe your advantage is disappearing. So white to play. What should we do about this threat?
Yeah, just write it to the panelists, please.
You see, they think they've got it right because they find some weird move and they think, oh, it must be that. Not necessarily. Just because I asked a question doesn't mean it has to be something fancy. Everyone's like, bishop a1.
Some of you may have
even terrible there.
Because this game appeared in your training booklet, so some of you might have already played through this game.
We've got all sorts of things going on. We've got take the knight on b5. We can't take a knight on b5. I assume you mean take the knight over here, right? So we could take the knight. We've got bishop a1. We've got rook d2. We've got bishop back to e1. Anything else?
Bishop e5.
Bishop e5 is okay. Yeah, Ray's made a good point there. The two bishops are important together, so you don't need to exchange them.
Yeah, they work well together in this type of position. They're controlling a lot of squares. Yeah. That dark square bishop has long-term plans to get to b8 and take those pawns.
So here, we definitely want to save our bishop, that's for sure. Now, we don't really have any good squares to go to. I mean, e5 is kind of where you'd want to go to, I guess, and try to get him around the back. But the problem, of course, is the rook, right? And I feel like as soon as you go bishop e5, and let's say let's go f6, again, your bishop's running out of squares, and the d-file is becoming a little bit more of a problem. So the entry squares are becoming a little bit loose, right? So if the bishop starts to go over here somewhere, then all of a sudden the knight is coming in. If the rook gets, has to move out to the way, then also this guy could come in. Could be a bit of a disaster. Okay, first probably black should defend his pawn, maybe like king f7, and then you get the idea that he's trying to get into the position. So instead, what I did is a very clever in-between move. Yeah, so some of you got this, which is great. When you went rook to d2. So we need to understand why did you go rook d2? Because earlier we weren't, we weren't really too bothered about challenging this rook. It wasn't a problem. But now that our bishop has become a little bit more unstable, then we need to try and challenge this rook for that reason, but also because this is black's main weakness, right? This is going to be our point of attack. And in order to attack this pawn, this rook needs to not be defending b8. So we have aspirations to get our bishop in around the back once the rook is removed, and then we will win that a7 pawn and hopefully get a queen. So black decides to go rook c8. He decides that it's too scary, right?
If he exchanges the rooks, then that's just going to be very easily winning for white with that simple plan. Some questions about bishop a1. Why is that not right?
Bishop a1, I guess, is similar to bishop b5, just a little bit less active. Your bishop is now deprived of many squares. You're only firing onto one diagonal, so you don't have any options to go left or to go back or anything like this.
The rook feels like a bit of a problem now. Before it wasn't that great on the d file, but it seems annoying. So yeah, if we can get the open file, we should do that. And rook d2 is by far the best to move. So well done if you got that.
I mean, white has a threat here, so maybe black just goes b5, but it feels as though it's hard again for white to be making progress in this sort of situation. So yeah, not so keen on bishop a1. It's not a terrible move. It's definitely possible, but yeah, just rook d2 is much stronger. Especially if your opponent has to go rook c8, as he did in the game, then you basically got this for free, right? So of course we should play rook d2. So yeah, so black went rook c8, and now we need to move the bishop somewhere. So bishop d4 was chosen, with the idea just to play b5 and win this knight. So why bishop d4? Because the bishop could technically go anywhere, right? It's because when you move the bishop and you want to threaten b5, black might go b5 himself, and so then you want to keep an eye on the a7 pawn to prevent that idea, right? So that's why bishop d4. Bishop goes back to e8, attacking our pawn. So bishop b3 seems fairly standard. King to f8, and now finally we'll go king to f2. We start to bring up king to the center. Pawn to f6. Sort of a very important moment in the game. Black has a threat. I won't tell you what it is. It's sort of obvious, I think. But okay, see if you guys are switched on. White to play. What should we do here?
Prophylactic thinking, look at what your opponent wants to do and then stop them from doing it.
Yeah, looks like everyone's got it. Fantastic.
Great.
Yeah, so black wants to go e5. So again, very important part of positional play. If you just identify what your opponent's threat is, it's much easier to find the right solution yourself. Okay, so e5 is the threat. Yep, so f4 is the correct answer, just to, again, prevent black from gaining any space. Okay, so black goes b5, finally. It's basically desperation, actually, because otherwise rook a2 is coming, and this bishop is dominating the knight. It's controlling like all of these dark squares, which makes the knight find it very difficult to find anywhere to go, right? So rook a2 is a very dangerous threat. So black needs to go for this desperation. This is kind of a typical idea. Whenever you feel like you're worse strategically, you need to be reacting dynamically. So this is exactly what black is doing here. So, and again, very important moment in the game. White to play. What do you think is the best move here? Whenever there's about to be exchanges, it's always a critical moment. So it's a moment where you have to invest some time and try to find the right solution.
Yeah, we'll give them a few minutes on this, because I think it's a very pivotal point in the game.
Yeah.
Already lots of different answers coming through.
Mm-hmm. Theo's got it, and he's given a nice explanation there too. Fantastic, Theo.
This is back to he's played through the game, which is great.
Has he? He's done his homework. Good.
Yeah, and understands the game, so that's brilliant. So I think that's the only correct answer so far.
There's a few before. Let's have a look. What are those?
Okay, well, yeah, just send your answers through to all panelists so we can see. I want everyone to try and give us an answer.
Sanjay and Tori got it right as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Florian.
What else did we get?
Bryony.
Whoops.
Lots of people just want to take the pawn.
we've got this, we've got this, we've got a takes, we've got c5, we've got rook a2. Anyone want to go king g1? Safety first? No? No, no one wants to go king g1. Good. All right, well, I guess we can start having a look through the different options then. So yeah, there's lots of possibilities here. So again, you've got to always be alert to what is black's plan. Well, he wants to just simply take our pawn, since the knight is still going to be defended by the bishop. So where to start? c5 is an interesting idea, but it's not one I like so much because you're kind of blocking up the queen side where you're stronger. And okay, you make some threat to the pawn, but they can kind of easily defend it, right? And
yeah,
so I'm not really so keen.
Pass pawn, but it's not. You can't improve that pass pawn because
yeah,
it's blocked off. So it's blocking up the position really. I think
it's not a terrible idea, but I just don't think it's the again the best. Bishop takes a7. What's going on here? Maybe they can go rook e8.
Yeah, that looks a bit annoying.
Could be a bit annoying, yeah. And then if we end up losing this pawn, it's kind of our main asset in this position. So we don't really want to lose that guy.
bishop back to c5.
You could even take here too.
Yeah.
I'll take the knight, go back to c5. I was wondering if I can take.
Yeah, probably.
They can take b5 actually. Yeah. So yeah, maybe I should just take c4 first then. It's not a terrible idea, but I think you give black more options than what happens in the game.
Pawn takes c4. Oh yeah, sorry.
Bishop takes.
Yeah.
Probably get some check. Yeah, king. E8 maybe. And maybe black can try to survive. He has some hopes where he can just set up a blockade with these opposite color bishops. So maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah,
but so that's not.
Yeah, we're always striving to find the best move in the position, not just a move. So you should always really try and find the best move, because then your opponent's got no counterplay and you just win. Test is easy, right?
For sure. Rook a2 is also a very sensible idea. You have a threat just taking b5. So maybe black has to go knight b6. You could take and get this passed pawn, but maybe he can survive.
Oh yeah, probably rook there.
Bishop c6. I'm a bit worried about this one maybe. Yeah, it's definitely a good suggestion still. I wonder if black can even ignore it potentially. Just go.
That might be better. I think once the rook's on a8, maybe we can go like bishop d1 and f3.
So what I did in game, I think, was just very, very clean solution, and this is an important thing to understand, is that whenever you have this kind of material imbalance and you have the stronger piece, whether it's let's say you're an exchange up, you have a rook against a knight or rook against a bishop, or you've got the two bishops, anything like this. One of the things you have to understand is this ability to be able to give back the piece on your terms, right? Or you cash in, right? I've done this on numerous occasions in my own games where I have an advantage, but it looks like my opponent is kind of setting up some sort of fortress. And if I can just liquidate, then all of a sudden I can go just transform my advantage into a winning game.
And then, so whilst you don't really want to get rid of the bishop power in this position, you've done all the hard work and you're changing your advantage. So take knight.
Exactly. So bishop takes knight. So now we're finally ready to cash in for our bishop pair advantage, because these pawns are going to be so strong. Bishop takes a7, and now black has no ideas to win up on. If he goes here, we can give a in between move, a check, and then push, or push this guy, either one. So black played rook takes c4. Now white gave a check anyway. King to f7, and again, very important always to be alert to your opponent's ideas, because that's how you can find the best moves. You want to play a7, of course. You want a queen. And the only way for black to defend is to go bishop c6, right? And he then stops you from queening. So if we know that that's black's idea, what do you think? How does white finish off the game here? What should you play first? Excellent. Everyone's got it. Almost. Oh no.
Also, something to mention is a lot of juniors say, "Oh, I don't want to go into an opposite color bishop endgame," but you just need to look at the position and find out, if it's winning or not. And this is clearly a winning position, even though it's opposite color bishop. So don't be fooled by that term that it's an opposite color bishop endgame and it'll be a draw. Look at the detail in the position.
Yeah, there's two factors there. So usually if it's just opposite color bishop endgame, just bishops and kings, then it's quite drawish. But if you have the inclusion of passed pawns, especially two passed pawns, then it can be often very good winning chances. And especially in middle games, opposite color bishops can be very useful because of the ability to attack the squares where your opponent can't defend, right? So as long as there's heavy pieces still on the board, the rooks and the queens, then you should actually be quite happy to go for an opposite color bishop middle game. So yeah, don't be fooled by that. Okay, so most of you said rook to d6. That's the correct answer. We just want to stop the bishop getting to c6 in the first place. So that's what white played. a7 is now the threat, and there's nothing that black can do to prevent white from queening. This one pawn, again, is not really important, so it comes back to that thing Sarah mentioned earlier about prioritizing. There's one check, king just moves up, and end of checks, right? So
end of game.
End of game, exactly. And so therefore, black had to resign. So I thought a very instructive game on how to, you take one small advantage and you just keep accumulating small advantages, right? Until eventually you can convert it into something more permanent, or some sort of material advantage or winning advantage, anything like that. So yeah, definitely a good game to start us off with?
Yeah, I've had a suggestion of A3, but I think we can just go A7 there.
Yeah, we're too fast, aren't we? So A3, A7, A2, we queen. And if you want a queen, I will happily take that from you.
Yeah.
So fine margins, right?
Yeah. No,
okay, so
very instructive game, and like Brandon said, you need to just do it in slow steps. Don't rush. Just take your time and keep trying to improve your position, and then don't give your opponent any counterplay, and then the game is a lot easier. Whereas if you've got a tactical mess, then it's so easy to go wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to look at one of Brandon's masterpieces now from last night.
We shall, but before we do that, let me just load something. I want to just, because we kind of touched on this subject, I want to just show this final part. So let me do this. Let's load up one of my own games here. Sorry, the share thing's not so good at the moment. Don't worry about fixing in a second.
Right.
Search. Actually, I need to search. It's like one of the most.
Why Brandon's in that game? Can you tell me if you've got any questions about that February material? Because I really want you guys to understand it, and I really want you to communicate with us if something's too hard or there's something you didn't understand. So there's a Q&A tab here. You could ask your question in the Q&A tab. That'd be really helpful for us, because we're trying to make the Academy good and helpful for you, and we really want lots of feedback. Thanks, Joseph. That's great.
Okay, so this is one of the positions I had from one of my most, well, I say recent, it's like this seems still like a year ago now. It was like, before lockdown came into effect. This is like one of the last games of chess I played, and this is in Australia. I was playing in North's club championship, and here I'm playing white against a guy who's pretty decent. He's like 2100. He's played really well so far. He's basically, taken me all the way to this end game, and it's difficult to know how to win. And this shows you what two things. First, when you have the stronger piece, so here I got the rook against the bishop, how to convert this position, and also why it's important to have a good knowledge of fundamental endgames. Otherwise, you have to calculate all of this stuff in advance to a finish, which is not so easy. Yeah, 21's pretty decent, isn't it? So yeah, here's a key idea we touched on earlier, is this ability to cash in when you need to, right? And if white doesn't cash in, is too kind of one-dimensional, you just want to keep your, go king f6, you're not really making any progress, as bishop is just holding onto everything. And so if you understand that, you can actually just go rook takes h5, which some of you mentioned in the chat, because if black now takes, in the game you want bishop f5, but if he now takes, all you have to understand here is just two different endgames. The first one is mind squares, and the second one is to do with key squares. So the key square one just tells you that when these pawns disappear, our pawn is in their half of the board, and so therefore it's going to have 6 key squares. So let's say for black to be able to draw his position, he would need to have opposition. He has to deny the entry into his position, right? If he goes king e7, I can go king g6. This is called outflanking, and doesn't matter what he does, I'm going to slowly move my way in. And then he's going to situation to Zugzwang. King goes to d8, bishop goes to e6, king takes e6. And even though black gets opposition, if you have a good command of the key squares, then this is a winning position, right? You don't need to calculate this all the way to a finish. So for example, white just goes here, pawn advances, and white wins. So that's the first endgame. Because I knew this, then calculating this position was very easy. And the other endgame you have to be aware of is the mind square one. The king now comes around for my pawn instead. King g6 and king c6. Okay, so because this is a question actually, white to play and win. See if you guys know your endgames. We won't touch on it too much because it's not really the topic for today, but it's always useful.
It's always good, yeah. It's good to
okay.
As well. Most
of you got it. Perfect. Yeah, king f7 is the correct move. So the mind squares is basically the squares, which is the favorable one for each side. So for white, it would be f6, because that's the one where he defends his own pawn and attacks the black pawn. For black, it would be d5, since that's the one where he defends his pawn and attacks the white pawn. So the rule is basically the first person step on the mine is going to get blown up, and he's going to lose the game, right? So yeah, what you want to do is force them to step on the first, right?
Just had a question. What's Zugzwang? Do you want to answer that, or should I?
What is Zugzwang?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Zugzwang is basically like, usually you want to be able to move, right? You're very, very happy if you want to move. If you have a chess game, and let's bring up another thing here real quick. Analysis board. Let's say I'm playing against you guys and I go e4, and then one of you guys wants to go knight a6 or knight c6, and I go knight a3, and you go back, and I keep making moves, and you go here, and I go here, and you go back, and you give me all the time in the world. I'm very happy. You're basically giving me move after move. You're skipping your turn, basically, right? And that's usually a bad thing. Now with Zugzwang, it's actually unfavorable to have the move. You would almost want to be able to say skip, right? Because if you can't skip, then you're going to lose. And so in this situation we had before, after what was it, king d7 to king f7, this is a Zugzwang because black has to make a move, and when he has to make a move, he has to move away from his pawn, and he loses it. And so if he could skip his turn, he would actually be like, yeah, I'll be happy to skip my turn. So that is exactly what Zugzwang is. Make sense?
I think that's a really good explanation. Yeah, you can't.
Great.
Yes, that's good. There's a question mark from Rock. Did you understand that, Rock? I'm sure you probably did, or maybe you're talking about something else. Remember, Q&As are a lot easier if you do it on the Q&A part. I had another question. Can we learn more about endgames in the next topic? Yeah, there's in the quiz at the end, it asks you what you want your next topic to be, so you can fill that in there.
We can do an endgame masterclass. I have all the studies already set up. Pawn endgames, rook endgames, the whole lot.
I've got one of them planned for March, actually. We're going to release the March masterclasses very, very soon, so keep an eye. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, so basically just to finish this one, the mind squares would just be, where's my position gone? King c6. So you go king f7 first, attacking the pawn. This forces them to the mind square, and then you can just come down, right? So as soon as they go on the mind square first, your square becomes safe. And so now black is in his Zugzwang. He has to move out the way. We win his pawn, and white is winning. So I finished off the game. Basically, he went bishop f5. After takes bishop f5, I went king f6, king d7. And again, I understood this idea to be able to cash in. And so I just chop that bishop off the board, right? Takes, and then just king f7. And my pawn will promote faster than his. And so he finally resigned here. Okay, great. So that's just a nice little side note to help you guys understand that theme. So let's go on to my supposed masterclass from last night. It's a good masterclass because it's against a guy called Bobby Fischer. How can it get better than that? Like you get to just positionally squeeze Bobby Fischer.
Oh, is he still alive then? I didn't realize that.
He's still playing. He's finding a way to play, you know, whether by telephone or whatever he's doing at the moment, who knows. His rating's a bit low though, so maybe it's not the real one. I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm playing white. He plays the Sicilian, so won't go to spend too much time on the opening theory. He's playing the Kalashnikov's variation so far, knight b5. And usually the main idea here is to play pawn to d6. You can't really allow this knight to d6, otherwise you have to get rid of you lose a bishop pair straight away, right? And you have all these dark square weaknesses. But anyway, he went a6. This is known as the Lofandro or something.
Yeah.
Strange name. And it's a tricky type of opening, but not really a very good one because strategically speaking, you've lost the bishop pair advantage and you've got all these weak dark squares on the board. And I don't know, I think a lot of low-rated players like going for this sort of thing because they think they're going to trade off lots of pieces and make an easy draw. But that's kind of just a myth, right? You don't need to trade off, you don't need to be trading off lots of pieces.
No, and it doesn't work. I mean, I'm sure you're really happy to see this because positionally you're already better.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you went queen f6, queen back to d1. This is all kind of theory so far, so we won't really touch on too much. Knight c3, knight d4, bishop b3. So this knight is quite strong at the moment on d4, so I want to kind of just be looking for a way to remove that. Knight to c6, and already a very bad move because he's just
superfluous knight.
Why is there question marks on him?
Yeah, they've updated Lichess. They've got these question marks now and exclamation marks. Yeah,
oh, cool.
They're always updating it. But
very
yeah,
nice.
The superfluous knight. Both knights want to be on d4, but only one of them can be there.
Yeah, exactly. So here I went knight to d5. I thought, okay, if you're not going to control the d5 square, I'm going to have that very nice outpost. Thank you very much. Queen to d6. Pawn to c3, kicking that knight away. Knight to b5, pawn to a4. It's again kicking the knight away. Knight to c7. And here I made, well, what the computer says inaccuracy. And technically I knew it was inaccuracy. I did see this during the game. I saw I could go bishop c5. And after takes, I could take, and I thought, yep, I can win the rook. And maybe I'm I should be winning, right? But my knight is going to I'm going to lose my knight, so I'm just going to bid exchange up. But I didn't really want to go for this. I kind of was in a mood for a positional squeeze. And so I thought, I'm not going to allow him any sorts of counterplay. So I decided to go knight to b6. And you'll see why I did this later on. I had the right idea of what I wanted to do well in advance. So at the moment I'm hitting the queen and the rook. So he has to take. Rook takes, rook b8, and just continue developing pieces normally, bishop c4. Knight to a8. Pretty weird move, but okay, he's trying to get rid of my knight, otherwise he can't get his pawn break. So just king e2. And remember that a king is a very useful piece, right? And it's like middle or end games. And so as soon as the queens have disappeared, you don't have to always castle. If you castle here, then your king's kind of a long way from the action. You know, he's pretty safe on e2, so that's where he should just sit.
By the way, lots of people are telling me like the stockfish advantage for white. You really shouldn't be looking at the engine. You should be looking at the position. It's quite damaging for your chess if you do that. So just look at the position, try and understand the features of the position.
Because from the engine, you're looking at it like with a low depth. And so if you're looking at, say, depth 15, depth 20, depth, it's always going to change its mind on the evaluation. And so it's more important to understand the reasoning behind the moves rather than if the evaluation drops slightly, that's not so important. If it drops considerably, then yeah, probably there's been a mistake, right? But if it only drops like 1 point or so, and you've still got like a plus minus position, then it doesn't really matter too much. And at the end of the day, we're all just humans, right? We just want somebody that's easy to play. We know that's we've got a big advantage rather than getting to some massive mess. It's easy to make a mistake.
Yeah, there's a question from William. I think it was from slightly early. He said, "What about rook d6?" So.
Rook d6, yeah, exactly. This is kind of the idea we want to make work. So actually, the whole idea of king e2 is that if he goes king to e7, I can bring the other rook across and help to defend that guy. So knight takes b6, bishop b6, castle. And now we're going to do William's move, rook to d6. So this is a very interesting moment in the game because I'm not really looking for any sort of dynamics. All I want to do is just completely squeeze his position. I just want to make sure these guys can never see the light of day. And so whole point of rook d6 is technically, I don't need to do that. You know, he moves the pawn to try and free the bishop, but he's going to lose a pawn, right? If he goes here, I can just take. But I don't even want him to be able to give me a pawn, you know, because sometimes that's a good thing to do. Just gives you one pawn and you can free his pieces. So I actually just want to go, you're not freeing the pieces. I don't want your pawn today. You can keep it. I'll take it at a later stage. And these guys are completely stuck. So instead of being like 1 point up, I'm currently kind of like up 8 points. If these guys can't get out, then I could just be 8 points up, right? Okay, so let's see. Whoops, I flipped forward.
Absolutely terrible. Remember Glenn Fleer always used to say, what did that piece think of, you know, what did the bishop think of the position? Did you ask?
Yeah, exactly. So knight goes to e7. So again, black's looking for some ways to get some counterplay. Pawn to h4. So it's just trying to gain space on both sides. That's always a good idea, right? If you can, you squeeze on the queen side, you squeeze on the king side, and black's going to have absolutely no space. King to h8. Okay, and what is black's idea? So first of all, work out what black's idea is, and then maybe you guys can find what white's move should be in this situation. Black. Yep, so everyone looks like they've got the idea. So black wants f5. So what should white be playing then?
Prophylactic thinking. We had a question on the Q&A. What will happen when I play bishop c7? I will answer that in a moment. A good question. Yeah,
bishop c7 is a useful move, right? Always kind of you make the rook a bit worse, but I'm not really that. I don't want to get into any sort of dynamics. Whenever you're strategically better, you don't need to be in a rush. You don't want to allow any sort of counterplay. So I don't want to allow any b5 ideas and to sack a pawn, gets bishop to b7, try to get some activity.
Yeah, if you ask questions in the Q&A, then I can timestamp when it's being answered. So it is quite useful to do it now if you've got a good question.
Okay. Yeah, so everyone's got the right answer. Just g4 here, stopping f5. And remember that every pawn move creates a weakness, and so the weakened square has been always the ones to the side of the pawn, and definitely this square, right? Because that's where both pawns have bypassed f4. And this is where it actually comes to the man himself, Bobby Fischer. He once said that in order to get squares, you have to give squares. And so I realized I'm giving this square, and the knight has a very easy route into f4, and it looks a little bit annoying. But I was happy to give that square because I thought it's more important.
Piece, isn't it? That's one good piece, but all Black's other pieces look terrible.
Precisely. So I don't really be too worried. It means the rook is still inactive. And so I'd rather not give him f5, the way he breaks open the position. I'd rather give him f4. And he didn't even go for it, actually. Well, he did a bit later on, but he did go for it straight away. I'd probably go h5, knight f4 check, let's move the king. And so what? He had one check. It's not the end of the world.
This is one of those positions where if you're Black, you're so frustrated because you can't think of a plan and you just like.
Oh yeah, I was loving it.
You're sat there loving it, and
it was fantastic. I was thinking, how can I just keep squeezing?
Yeah.
This poor guy. It's like that scene from Star Wars, when they're in is it like A New Hope, when they're in that little sewage part and they're getting like squashed in by the wall. It's like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Black goes h5. Trying to go for dynamics. Again, I'm not interested in his dynamics. I don't want his pawn. You can keep his pawn. Harry is not worth it. So I just went f3. Just said I want to keep this, this bind, not allow f5. He took, I took, okay. Knight g6, king f3, just prophylaxis. So now it doesn't even come with check. Knight f4, a5. Again, just keep squeezing. Just keep making useful, improving moves. g6. h5. So now he's created a lever, a hook, right, where I can try and open up the h file for my rook. King to g7, and I decided actually I don't want any more. I still don't want any dynamics, so I decided just to go check. So let's keep the position nice and closed. King h7 and g5, nice and closed. That's all I want.
It's a dream position.
It's beautiful. I want to make sure none of his pieces can move, basically only the knight. And there goes knight e6, and this is kind of I think a very important moment in the game because he's now attacking. G5, he's threatening f6 and f5 type of stuff. So how does white, what do you think is the best way here for white to keep, to deny Black literally any sorts of counterplay? White to move. Pretty much just two suggestions at the moment. 50-50. Okay, so basically the two suggestions are bishop e3 is actually one unique one, but yeah, mostly people want to take the knight or go king g4. They're all sensible suggestions, actually. All of them are fine. And this is the thing about positional play. Whenever you're dealing with tactical play, usually there's just one right answer. And the engine says either you're winning or you're not. Positional play, it's kind of like a mix. You can play all of these moves and you're still having that advantage, right? So it's not necessarily like a right or wrong answer here. So it's more about just trying to not allow your opponent to have any sorts of counterplay. So king g4 is a move that looks quite sensible. And it's definitely something I considered, but I didn't really want to allow any f6 or f5 and just have to, calculate all these possibilities. And so I decided I wasn't really that fond of that move. Bishop e3 is sensible as well, but again, I didn't really want to allow him to ever be able to sacrifice a pawn and to be able to free his position on that side either. And so I decided just to cash in now. I thought my position is very nice, and I don't really need the bishop pair anymore. So I decided just to take the knight, actually. It looks like I'm giving counterplay with the rook. But remember, it's good not to, this concept of not seeing ghosts, right? That you have to actually find a conclusion. Is it a problem or is it not? Because if I just go king to e3, then what's the rook really doing? You made one check, I move out the way, and so now what do you want to do? Okay, you can go rook f4, you can try to do something like this, but again, it's not anything scary at all. I went rook to d1, basically hinting at the idea that I might sack on d7. I just said to him that I might do that. I might not. I don't really want to do it because I want to keep squeezing. I'm just saying I might do it if you're not careful. If you start going after Gary, then I might decide to crash through. And he didn't fancy that. And so he went rook f7. I mean, to be honest, actually, if you did go rook g4, my calculation was to go bishop c7 first, just to have this idea of take on e5. And if it goes rook a8, then I would take. I crash through here, and then I have this nice little mate, bishop e5. So again, it's all about value of the pieces, right? Even though I'm like material down because his rooks are terrible and my bishop and everything's fantastic. Rook is on the 7th. The quality of my pieces is far superior. So he went into passive mode. He went rook f7 and just got too scared. He's like, I'm gonna just survive. So again, I'm just enjoying myself. So I'm just slowly increasing my position. Bishop c7, rook a8, pawn to b4, king g8, bishop to d8. I'm thinking, right, the bishop now wants to be on f6. I could try and attack this pawn and take away the f file. Okay, his rook tries to come around the back. So I now take a pawn. So at least I'm now up material. That's always nice. Rook to h5. No, you don't. Not having that. King f7. And here I decided, okay, it's probably many ways to win this position. But I thought, the last piece that needs to be activated is the king. The king wants to go somewhere. He wants to be involved. And so, yes, you could go rook takes. I'm sure that's winning. You could definitely go rook takes. Of course, I considered it, but why rush? Why rush? Let's help bring the king in. So king d4, king e8, king c5.
That poor bishop on c8. It really hasn't.
Yeah. King b6, king e8. It's always nice when your component's just like confined to moving their piece back. He's got so many pieces on the board, and yet he's almost like in zugzwang.
You're quite mean, Brandon.
I am. I'm a very mean chess player. Don't play me. King c7, rook h4. He's trying to take 1 pawn. He's like, please, just give me 1 pawn. Nope, not having that one either. Because the thing is, even if he takes that pawn, I mean, I could go h7, h8, but I was like, I don't want to give him my pawn. So I go rook d4, rook a7. And also now he just starts blundering. He's getting low on time. He just doesn't know what to do. He's just like, it's just a horrible position. My next plan is just to march his c pawn forward a bit first, and then I might decide to finally do something and break through. But he went rook a7. So what's his time? If I move this up, okay, so he's down to 2 minutes now. It looks like this is a 15-minute game, 15 plus 15 second game. He wrote rook a7. I was like, oh, thank you very much. I'll have that. Thing is, guys, my king was very hungry. He hasn't been fed. And so he decided to eat the bishop. Then he decided he wants the rook. He then took the rook. Then we wanted the pawn. And then we decided to put the guy out of his misery. Finally checkmate him. So
very nice.
Yeah, definitely one of my better games. But the thing is, like when you see games like this, it's like you can start to have a bit of better appreciation for positional play, right? It's just so enjoyable. Like you have no risk of losing. There's never a moment in a game where I felt like I was ever worse. Like actually, I think you guys analyzed the game, so you can see here. If you look at the rating graph, there was never a moment where I was actually it was better for black. Made some little falls here and there, but more or less it's white was always in complete control, and so therefore, and I had 16 minutes left, so I didn't really use much time because I didn't really need to. Just made simple moves. Didn't have to calculate anything. So it was all nice and
that's the thing. It's like risk-free chess, positional play. And if you know the ideas and the plans, you can just play good moves without having to worry about getting bad positions. Brandon hasn't followed the taking your time principle. Yeah, that is true, actually. But I guess his positional understanding is so good, and his opening knowledge that he didn't actually need to. Although, yeah, Brandon, that's a telling off, actually. You need to take your time. I always saying to them, you think you know the best move, take your time.
Technically, there's a 15-second increment, so we played like 48 moves. So actually, I did take a bit of time because I'm getting 15 seconds to every move. I'm actually ended up using quite a bit. So it looks like I played a bullet, right? Where just getting time back on the clock, but actually it's not. Yeah, because of the big increment, it's a little bit.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for that, Brandon. That was brilliant. And if you can share the link to the game in the chat, that'd be really good. People might want to have a look.
Sure.
And what we'll do now is we'll end this webinar, and then at 15:15 I'll be back here with Mickey Adams for the second session. So have a break, have a snack, have some fresh air, whatever you need to do. We'll see you back here at 15:15. Yeah, sometimes, Daniel, rules are there to be broken. Sometimes you should break the rules. I mean, chess isn't as easy that you can just follow these rules and you'll win every game. You have to take some kind of decisions and important positions.
That's the difference between a good player and a strong player, right? You've got these guidelines in place, and the strong player knows when to break the rules. That's what Kasparov once said. You have to know when to break them.